So, this is a nudge. And this is a nudge. And this is Nudge, a book about nudges. Hey, this is Alex from Guys Can Read, and today I'm giving my book report on Nudge, byline Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth, and Happiness by Richard Thaler and Sunstein. In this book report, I'll be talking about what a nudge is, as defined by Thaler and Sunstein, give a summary of the book, provide an intro to behavioral economics, share some of my favorite nudges that the authors include in the book, and then finally summarize who should read Nudge. And as always, before we get going, I would love it if you could like this video and subscribe to the Guys Can Read YouTube channel. Now, let's roll. So, Nudge at its core is a book about decision making. Humans are funny. We may claim to hold certain beliefs, like I should eat healthy, and then we act in ways that directly oppose these beliefs, like eating at McDonald's, or if you're an intellectual, the Don's Cafe. So Thaler and Sunstein pose a question. How can choice architects, or anybody that frames choices to humans, ourselves included, help people make better decisions? Said simply, how can we nudge people towards better choices? Thaler and Sunstein start out by taking us through a few principles of nudges. First off, we have default choices. This is making things that people should do opt out rather than opt in, or set a default option that's best or most commonly good for customers. Think of like subscription tier options to a streaming service if you need an example of this. The second principle is to expect error. It helps us to remember that people make mistakes, and anything that you can do to lower these examples is great for choice architecture. One specific example that comes to mind is doors and how people will put door handles for pulling on both sides of a door, even though one side is absolutely meant to be pushed on. This is the most frustrating and easy, low-hanging fruit of choice architecture I think I have ever come across. I understand it makes some doors look nice. I don't care. The third principle is give feedback. If a choice gets made regularly, provide feedback to your humans of the impact of their choice. For example, at water bottle fill stations, you see a message sometimes stating, "We've replaced 1,000 plastic bottles with this station." So as you fill up your water bottle, you then can see, "We've replaced 1,001 plastic bottles with this station." This is good feedback that encourages refillable water bottles, and feedback in general is a way that you can encourage choices through a nudge. And the fourth principle I'll highlight here, and there's a couple others that I won't get into, is incentives. This is what most people think of when they think of economics, right? An incentive for living with your means is that you'll have money left in retirement. But the authors are quick to point out that incentives can create incentive conflicts. In the last example, your incentive to spend money on a vacation is that it's relaxing and fun, but this conflicts with the incentive of saving by not going on the vacation. In these scenarios, the authors propose ways to make incentives more salient or realistic and visible to humans. Maybe if you saw, for example, how much the money spent on the vacation could grow to in 10 years of investing, you may decide not to go on the vacation. Setting nudges aside momentarily, let me give a quick recap of Nudge, the book. Nudge starts off in part 1 by highlighting the fact that I mentioned earlier. Humans are not perfect decision makers. If we were, we would be what Thaler and Sunstein refer to as econs, and I want to say Nassim Nicholas Taleb, author of Black Swan, uses this moniker too. Then, the authors highlight some of the reasons why humans are unreliable decision makers, including logical biases or heuristics that were originally researched by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. You may have heard of some of these, which include anchoring, availability, and representativeness, but you can go check out the book Thinking Fast and Slow for more on these heuristics. Because humans aren't always great at decision making, Thaler and Sunstein introduce a movement and advocate for that movement, which they call libertarian paternalism. At surface level, I get it, those words aren't exactly sexy, but I do like this school of thought. The philosophy here basically says, let's not restrict options or freedoms, but instead provide some guidance and ushering towards good choices. You could think of this like a parent-child, letting the child choose to do whatever it wants, but offer suggestions or pushes in certain directions. For example, you want your students to eat healthier in the cafeteria. Putting fruit at eye level is good libertarian paternalism via nudge, as would be putting junk food somewhere difficult to access in the cafeteria. But banning potato chips or requiring all students to take an apple would not be libertarian paternalism and is likely going to lead to food waste. Basically, part 1 of Nudge sets up the stage for the rest of the book, which is comprised mainly of areas where nudges can help humans make better choices. Part 2 is about money. Nudges described here can help people save, invest better, and be better equipped to deal with credit markets like those for student loans and auto loans. There's also a discussion about an attempt in Sweden to privatize Social Security with mixed results. Part 3 is about healthcare after that. Thaler and Sunstein begin by talking about nudges that could be applied for Medicare and prescription drugs, and then discuss how we can use these nudges or others to increase organ donation rates in the US. Then Part 3 finishes up with a chapter on how nudges can be used to make people more energy efficient, contributing to the health of the planet in the process. Part 4 talks about other choice freedoms in society. The choice of what school your kids go to, the freedom to sue medical professionals for malpractice or negligence. The authors recommend here that health insurers provide a plan that waives this freedom in return for cheaper insurance. And then they talk about the choice and freedom of marriage, which the authors propose should be separated from tax implications to altogether avoid the whole church and state debacle. And finally, Part 5 contains a list of other possible nudges in all sorts of different domains, as well as a discussion of objections that might come up against libertarian paternalism. These include a slippery slope argument. For example, what's to stop us at libertarian paternalism? Why not outright paternalism? Evil or malicious nudgers and nudges, and that the right to fail should be respected. Sunstein and Thaler refute most of these quite well. And now that we've talked through the contents of the book, it probably makes sense here to give you a little background on behavioral economics and what this field is in general, considering nudge is one of the foundational texts in this school, behavioral economics, and Richard Thaler is in a lot of ways considered one of its founders. Behavioral economics sits at the intersection of psychology and economics and is a little different than traditional econ. Because when people talk about economics, they think of stock markets, monetary policy like the Federal Reserve rate, the unemployment rate, maybe exchange rates between the US dollar and Great British pound. But behavioral economics is super applicable to you and me. So is regular economics, but I'll bang on that drum some other time. Behavioral economics looks at the choices of humans, choices that impact, once again, health, wealth, and happiness. And the main way that behavioral economics is different than regular economics is that it refutes the assumption that humans are rational actors. Sometimes we are, but many times we're not. One of the keystones of most typical economic philosophies or theories is that humans are rational agents and will act in their best interests and choose the optimal outcomes in all market situations. Thaler and Sunstein would argue that that is objectively false. The field of behavioral economics really gets going in the 70s and 80s, however, due to the work of two Israeli psychologists who I mentioned earlier, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. These two are considered the founding fathers of behavioral economics and pioneered research around irrationality in human decision-making. The availability heuristic and others I mentioned earlier were coined by them, but let me provide a quick example of the availability bias here so you understand what it is. Say that Olivia Rodrigo is coming to town, and you're asked to guess whether or not her show will sell out. Say you're thinking about buying tickets, and you are trying to figure out, can I wait for this? Can I not? Let's see. So if you've heard a couple of your friends recently say that they're going, you are going to be prone to overestimate the likeliness that the show sells out. Because your brain searches for available data points suggesting a sellout, and because your friends have told you that they're going, you have these data points available to you. You believe people are going to the show. You automatically do this via your System 1 or automatic thinking, even though a couple of your friends going to the show likely has little bearing on whether or not it's going to sell out. Daniel Kahneman, who eventually wins the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002, would go on to write the book Thinking Fast and Slow, which studies our automatic System 1 thinking and slower, more rational System 2 thinking, along with many of the heuristics that come with System 1 thinking. Check out the book at the link in the video description, but buyer beware that this is largely an academic text and it is dense. After Tversky and Kahneman, we fast forward to Thaler and Sunstein at the University of Chicago. These two build a lot off the work of Kahneman and Tversky, eventually coming up with the concept of nudges and ultimately making behavioral economics into this living, breathing field of study with a lot of impact on our day-to-day and modern-day policies. Maybe the best thing about this book is how many different examples of nudges that Thaler and Sunstein provide, so I'm going to walk through a couple of them here. First example, in Scotland, lawmakers ordered the removal of the white lines in between driving lanes in the council area of Aberdeenshire. This is called traffic calming, and not only does this reduce speeds of traffic, but also increases the distance between opposing traffic streams. This nudge works in a funny way because by removing these traffic lanes in the middle of a street, you actually remove feedback from the choice of driving speed. With traffic lines, you may be inclined to drive faster because you know you're in the lines. Like, what does it really matter how fast you're driving? But without the lines, it feels riskier to drive faster since you have oncoming traffic without lines that govern where they're going to be able to drive. I'm in the process right now of becoming radicalized against cars, but I'll talk more about that in a future book report on Paved Paradise by Henry Graeber. Second example, trayless cafeterias. So at Alfred University in New York, some curious cafeteria managers and students made the move to stop using food trays to cut down on food waste. That, seems pretty meaningless, right? Like, what is removing food trays going to do to food waste? You would assume most people are getting the right amount of food that they want to eat. Well, food and beverage waste actually dropped anywhere from 30 to 50% when trays weren't offered at Alfred University. Alfred U said that their waste savings had been about 1,000 pounds of solid food waste and 112 gallons of liquid food waste saved on a weekly basis. Now, I'm sure some students complained a little bit about the lack of trays, and I'll admit myself, this does feel a little more paternalistic than libertarianist on that sliding scale. But at the end of the day, you can still get the food you want. You just might have to make multiple trips to the cafeteria to do that. The authors do point out that by way of second order consequences, that because trays don't have to be washed, that water consumption has undoubtedly fallen as well. And we wouldn't be surprised if these cafeterias turn out to have a longer term effect on waistlines. Healthier, check. Less food waste, check. Less water used, triple check. Healthier students, quadruple check. Let's go Saxons. Thaler and Sunstein joke in a later edition of the book, Nudge, that this next nudge has been the most popular and well received from the original edition of the book. At restrooms in Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, authorities made the choice to etch an image of a black housefly into each urinal. Weird, but not when you take into consideration the fact that, as guys, we don't normally pay much attention to where we're aiming when we're taking a leak. However, the flies give men a target to aim at. And Odd Kieboom, an economist directing building expansion at Schiphol Airport, has said that the etchings reduced spillage by 80%. Why aren't we doing this everywhere? Like, is Big Urinal Matt lobbying against fly etching so that they can continue to stay in business? I can think of a cool dozen bars and music venues near me that would benefit from this fly etching so that the bottom of the bathroom floor isn't covered in piss. Wake up, men. Let's start pissing on flies. The last example I'll give here is don't mess with Texas. I'm sure you've heard the phrase before, but you probably don't know the history behind it. In the 1980s, the Texas Department of Transportation sank a bunch of money into a mostly failed advertising campaign to reduce roadside litter. This campaign attempted to convince people that not littering was their civic duty. This kind of fell on deaf ears in Texas. But Texas DOT discovers that many of the litterers were men between the ages of 18 and 24, so they need a quote, tough-talking slogan that would address the unique spirit of Texas pride, end quote. Targeting this demographic, the state runs ads that feature Willie Nelson and members of the Dallas Cowboys crushing beer cans in their hands and growling,
"Don't mess with Texas."
It's definitely gimmicky, but within the first year of the campaign, litter in the state had been reduced by a remarkable 29%. In its first 6 years, there was a 72% decrease from where litter started in visible roadside litter. And now, this saying is everywhere in Texas. You can't go anywhere without seeing "Don't Mess with Texas." This story is a great reminder of the good that nudges can do, and also that anything can go viral, even in 1985. Okay, a quick recap here on who I think should read Nudge. For starters, I genuinely recommend this book to anybody who's interested in psychology. Choice and decision making are such a huge part of the human experience that how we make decisions and how we can make better decisions should be of interest to anyone who's interested in how the brain works, i.e. psychology. If you're an econ fanatic too and enjoyed books like Freakonomics, I think you'll love Nudge. Specifically, I'd say you're probably most interested in the sections on health, public policy, and state-run programs, if you're an econ nut, that is. But the section of how to get people to save more money with nudges is really good too. I'd additionally add that anybody who's interested in public policy at all should check out this book. Reason being, this book contains numerous examples of how to get citizens to vote more, give spare change to nonprofits, exercise, drive safer, increase organ donations, you name it. If you're in public office, my take is that you should become versed in behavioral economics, if not an expert. That said, my opinion on this book is that it can be enjoyed by pretty much anybody, but the book, like I mentioned earlier, is academic in nature. First, the discussions of heuristics and biases might break your brain a little bit. The academic studies that they talk about in those chapters are lengthy. And second, the section on how to help people pick better 401ks and health insurance are long, and I'll be honest, those sections lost me a couple times. Also, if you're staunchly political and would advocate for example, either outright banning cigarettes or removing the Surgeon General's warning from cigarette packs, libertarian paternalism is a very centrist approach. So from the get-go, you might not enjoy this book as much if you're very political on either side of the spectrum. Though I would urge you, please engage with more books outside of your regular school of thought. You will learn a lot and have better conversations as a result of it. And that's it. Once again, this was Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. If you want to grab the book, please consider using the link in the video description to bookshop.org to go buy it. Guys Can Read receives a small portion of book sales when you do this, as we are an affiliate seller for Bookshop, and your support means a lot to us. As always, please also like the video, subscribe to Guys Can Read on YouTube, follow us on Instagram at Guys Can Read, and use the Google form linked in the description if you want to join our mailing list or a Guys Can Read book discussion group in your city. I'll see you next time.